So a couple months ago, I reviewed the GAOMON PD1561, and GAOMON just sent me the V2, the upgraded version of that same tablet. So let's see if the new version fixed some of the stuff I mentioned last time. Quick disclosure before we get going, GAOMON sent me this tablet for free, and this video is sponsored, but everything I'm about to say is my actual experience using it, same as last time. So the PD1561 V2 is the follow-up to the original PD1561. Same 15.6-inch screen, same general idea, aimed at people who want a bigger drawing surface without paying flagship prices. They did change quite a lot on this one though, and a couple of those changes are basically the exact things I addressed in my last video. So when I reviewed the original PD1561, I liked it overall, but there were a couple of things I pointed out. The first one was the screen. There was a noticeable blurriness while I was using it, and I was pretty sure it was coming from the pre-applied matte screen protector. Now, big grain of salt on that one, I only had the one singular unit, so that might have just been something off with my specific V1. I can't tell you every single V1 out there had that exact same problem because I simply had no way of knowing that. The second thing was the cables. The V1 used this 3-in-1 cable to connect everything, and there was no way at the time to run the whole thing off of a single USB-C connection, which is my personal preference for hooking up a drawing tablet. So those are two things that I want to address, as well as looking into some of the new things with this tablet. So let's talk about what's actually in the box, and I'll keep this section as quick as I can because you can see most of it on screen right now and not much has changed. You've got the tablet itself, the new G1 pen, a pen holder with spare nibs and a nib extractor inside it, the stand, a drawing glove, a protective case, and then the cables. Now, these cables are one of the changes from last time. As I mentioned, the V1 came with that 3-in-1 cable, but this time you get an HDMI to mini HDMI cable and a USB-A to USB-C cable, and those two are what you use to connect everything. The other thing related to cables is that this tablet is compatible with a full-featured USB-C cable, which I'll come back to later because that's the part I actually care about. One of the things I did differently this time around is I actually used the included drawing stand. It attaches securely to the back of the tablet with the screws that come in the box, and that lets me set the drawing angle wherever I want it. Last time I was using a bunch of stands that I already had lying around, so this time I just went with what GAOMON sent me. Alright, so the screen. This is the big one for me. Before I get into it, I want to say up front that I am not a technical person. I'm not going to sit here and read you numbers about color gamuts and delta E values because that's not really my area, and I would just be reading them off of a page. So if you want the full spec breakdown, I'll put some of it on the screen, and then you can go straight to the GAOMON website for the complete list. What I can tell you is what it was actually like to draw on this thing. So, the V1 had that blurriness I mentioned. The V2 does not. This screen is noticeably sharper, and the colors look way more accurate and vibrant to my eye. And the way I really noticed it was in the Clip Studio Paint interface. All those tiny menus and little tool icons along the side, I could read all of it on this screen without squinting or leaning in. And honestly, on the last tablet, I simply could not do that. But like I said, take everything I say with a grain of salt. That could have just been something up with my specific V1 unit, but side by side on my desk, this is a clear difference. The other thing I wanted to test was glare, because I've got overhead lights in my room, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have similar things like ceiling fans or tall desk lamps. And that's exactly the kind of setup where a screen like this can get washed out, or you might notice some specific glare that's blocking your screen. So I tested it out a few different ways. I've got a little monitor light on the top of my screen in addition to my regular room lights, so I ran it with both of them on, with one of them on, with the other on, And then I also tested it with no lights on in the room at all. And in every single one of these use cases, the tablet was perfectly usable. Now, you'll notice in some of my recording footage that at certain angles, the screen does actually reflect my overhead lights. I'm not going to pretend that that's not real, but I will say that that's pretty much from the camera catching it at the angle off to the side. So I don't actually see that glare when I'm looking at the tablet head on. So I just want to temper your guys' expectations that the camera placement may be causing a glare that you will not see if you're staring directly at your tablet. And that's kind of the whole thing with the screen for this one. Between it being sharper, the colors looking better, and it holding up with whatever lighting I threw at it, this was the part of the tablet that impressed me a lot. So that was complaint number 1 handled. Let's talk about the cables. Like I said, the V2 comes with these 2 cables instead of the old 3-in-1. And when I got it, I plugged it in and it just worked right out of the box, no issues. The other thing to note is that the power draw on this one is low enough that you don't need an external power adapter anymore. There is no DC port on the back. And honestly, I'm just really grateful for that setup because that's fewer things plugged in at my desk and fewer things taking up space in my wall outlets. Now, the big thing I mentioned earlier about this tablet is that it now supports a full-featured USB-C connection. I've got a full-featured USB-C cable of my own because that's my preferred way of connecting a drawing tablet to my computer. It's just one cable and it powers my whole setup. And this worked exactly how I wanted to. A big thing worth noting is that GAOMON does not include a USB-C cable in the box, so that is something you're going to have to research and buy separately, and you want to make sure that you're getting the full-featured USB-C cable. A regular USB charger cable will not work in this instance. One more thing about this, and this is something that I personally did not test myself, but because of the full-featured USB-C support, you can apparently connect this to Android devices. I don't know the specifics, but if that's something you're interested in, definitely do your own research on it, because I can't tell you in this video how well it's going to work. So once I had everything set up, I basically just started using this thing as my daily driver. And a big part of it was pairing it with my Toolbox Elite Plus, which I've got sitting right here as my Bluetooth controller. So I've got all my Clip Studio shortcuts mapped to it, including my brushes, erasers, moving the canvas around, undo and redo, all of that. Which means I'm drawing on the tablet with my left hand and everything else is right here under my right hand without me having to ever reach for a keyboard. And that's kind of the whole thing with how this tablet just slotted into my setup. Between the one cable and the controller, I didn't really have to change anything about how I normally worked. It just kind of dropped into the space where my usual setup goes. So most of the footage you're seeing on screen right now is from an actual project I was working on during all of this, which I'll get to at the end of the video. But I put a lot of hours into this thing. Line art, coloring, all the stuff that I normally do. It held up for long sessions without my eyes getting tired. Now, I do want to point out one singular thing that I ran into, and I want to be upfront that, again, this might just be a me thing. Every time I boot up my computer from completely off, the GAOMON driver loads on startup like I set it to, but for some reason it defaults the working area to my computer monitor instead of the tablet. So I'll move the pen across the tablet and the cursor moves on my external monitor. Honestly, it's an easy fix. I just go into the driver settings and switch the workspace back over to the tablet screen. It's not an annoyance. Trust me on that. It's not an annoyance. It's more like an extra step. And again, that might not happen for everybody. That could just be something with my specific setup. I'm editing this in after the fact, but I actually ended up reaching out to the contact I have at GAOMON, and they sent over all of my information to the technical team. I gave them information such as the current version of the GAOMON driver that I'm using, the specific setup, the computer that I'm using, and so on. And fairly quickly, they actually got back to me with a new updated version of the driver and had me test it out. And after loading the new driver, what do you know? it was working again. As someone who works a full-time job in IT tech myself, I am extremely grateful to the technical team for their clear communication as well as their quick fix. So thank you to everyone that I spoke to or emailed at GAOMON for helping me resolve this issue. Okay, so here's something I didn't expect this tablet to do. You can turn the screen off and keep drawing on it. So if you disconnect the signal cable, the display shuts off, and the tablet just becomes a regular drawing tablet. Like the kind where you're drawing on a surface and watching your monitor instead of staring at your hand. The main reason that this matters is ergonomics. When you're drawing on a pen display, you're looking down at your hands the entire time. Your head's tilted forward, your shoulders are rolled in, and after a couple of hours of that, your neck is going to let you know about it. Trust me on this, that's just the trade-off you make for drawing directly on the screen. But with the screen off, you're not looking down anymore. Your monitor's at eye level, so your head's up, your back's straight, and your arm is the only thing doing the work. So you can sit back in your chair and just draw. That's a completely different posture, and over a long session, it makes a real difference. So overall, who is this tablet actually for? Well, before I get into that, one more thing I didn't test is tilt support. Once again, I did not test tilt support on that, and I know a lot of you are in the comments asking about that. And the reason is because tilt support isn't really something that I use personally when making my anime animations, so I don't have anything useful to tell you about how it performs. But I know a lot of people do use it, and based purely on the specs, this thing should be great for that in Clip Studio Paint or any other program with tilt-sensitive brushes. So look into that on your own if that's a big part of how you draw. Now for the price. GAOMON is aiming this at students who want something affordable but still capable, marketing this for entry-level digital creators who are just getting into illustration or design, and towards people on a limited budget who want better value than what you'd usually get in this price range. And having used it myself for several weeks, that feels about right to me. I'll put the current price at the time of recording on screen, and there's a link in the description. The other thing worth mentioning is portability. The screen is 15.6 inches, which basically is about the same footprint as a 16-inch laptop. So this fits inside a decent-sized backpack or bag, and you can take it anywhere. Plus, with the updated cable setup, it should be easier for you to take this tablet and set it up anywhere. And then, the big question. Should you get the V2 over the V1? Now, if you've already picked up a V1 recently, don't feel bad about it. That is still a solid tablet and it's still going to do the job for you. But honestly, I think that the V2 is a pretty good trade-off. They improved so much from the original model that the upgrade is worth it in my opinion. I mean, heck, the screen alone was enough for me, and then you've got the new pen, the cable setup, the screenless mode on top of that, and between the two of them, honestly, I would go with the V2. So that's the GAOMON PD1561 V2. Big thank you to GAOMON for sending this one over and for having me back on for a second round. If you're interested in picking one up, the link is in the description below. And like I mentioned earlier, all that time-lapse footage that you've been seeing throughout the video was from an actual project I was working on, so go check that out afterwards. Thanks for visiting the Mind Palace, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye. Just ignore me, please.